I'm going to give a talk I've never given before, and we're going to see how that goes. I normally talk about the future of work, the future of learning, jobs that don't exist yet, and then something started happening. The last 3 or 4 talks I've given, I give 3 to 5 a month. People came up to me and they started crying. It was a little weird. But I realized that humans are under a tremendous amount of stress. And I don't think we're acknowledging it. And I think it speaks to the contraction before expansion that Tara just spoke about. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity being at the CUSP conference to put a design challenge out to you guys. So I want to start off by saying, okay, well, what is design? And I looked for the most expansive definition that could be inclusive. So I picked this one from Herbert Simon, which was mirrored a little bit one that Dave and I had a conversation about, which is basically design is to devise a course of action to take existing solutions into preferred ones. So our existing situation is we're trapped between the 3rd and the 4th Industrial Revolution. So in order to engage in this discussion, I think it's important to delineate between story and narrative. So normally I get up and I tell a story about how the world's changing. But in this particular talk, I'm going to engage with you guys in narrative. And the difference between story and narrative, according to John Hagel, who I like to learn from Deloitte, he says is that a story is resolved. It has a theme, it has a point. You can listen to the story, reflect on it, think about what it means to your own life. Narrative is unresolved. It needs you to complete the action. So I need you guys to help me complete this action. So start with the design process. This is pretty much a modified version of the one that the UK Design Council uses. First part of it's problem finding and framing. Second part of it's problem solving and solution selecting. We're way here on what I want to talk to you about, and I want to start with some questions. So what is this identity crisis? I think it's really 3 questions that we're stuck with. We're stuck with them in terms of how we answer them to each other, but more importantly, we're stuck with them in terms of how we generate our own internal monologues. So the first one is, who are you? Second one is, what do you do for a living? Which is the first question everybody seems to ask each other. And then, where are you from? 3 very basic, simple questions that I think are changing right now. And something's happening at the individual level, and I think this is why humans are under stress. So we're in the age of accelerations. I have the good fortune to have crossed paths with New York Times' Thomas Friedman about 4 or 5 years ago, and we speak regularly. He says that we're going through 3 climate changes at once: the climate of technology, the climate of the climate, and the climate of the market. So the climate of technology is Moore's Law. Technology is coming, robots are coming to get your jobs, all that stuff you've heard about. Climate change is we've got 12 years to save the planet. And the market is where we've gone from a connected to interdependent society where changes happening on other sides of the world affect us immediately. These 3 climate changes that he describes are changes in the macro context in which we live. What does that mean to the individual? So if we look at the velocity of change, humans have the ability to adapt to linear change. Linear change is 1, 2, 3, 4 steps that are equally distant apart. What we're going through is exponential change, where every step is double the prior step. And where we are in the process is we're starting to be at that point where between 2 becomes 4 or 4 becomes 8. And that's the stress we're starting to feel. And I think it's happening across the dimensions he describes, but I think it's happening to individuals a little differently. So this is a framework that I use sometimes when I give my talks. And I realized that it was wrong, so I'm going to present it to you, but I realized there's some aspects of it that are incomplete. So we're living longer at a time that the change rate is happening faster. So we've made huge leaps in longevity. Back in 1750, you'd live to 37 years old. Now, if you're born today, there's a good chance you'll live to 100. At the same time, we're going through this massive wave of technology-driven change. And back in 1750, you had 2.5 generations to absorb the change of something like the steam engine. And now you're going to have to absorb 4 or 5 different paradigm shifts within a single generation. And the reason I think this chart is wrong or incomplete on its own, is it really is just talking about the technology-driven change. And that's the stuff we make, the tools. They're coming at us faster. We're being threatened by our own creations. But along the way, I noticed that something else was going on. We're going through a massive cultural change. And so I started making a list, and this is a short list of some of it, and then I'll unpack it. So we're going from race, we're going from a white majority, and I'm largely talking about the US here, to soon will be a white minority, at least in our lifetime. We're going from Christianity being the sort of dominant war on Christmas kind of conversations to more of the population being unaffiliated or a plurality of religions. From a regional standpoint, we're going from, although we've been predominantly living in cities, we have more of a rural mindset, to overwhelmingly living in urban cities. And we're going from about a third Republican, Democrat, and Independent to being highly polarized on either side, and tribes with most folks in the middle. We have like 43% independent right now. And then ages, we've been a sort of a youthful society, at least that's how advertisers portray us. The 18 to 44, the 18 to 54 demographic is the one you wanted to go after. Soon we're going to have more old people than we have young people in an aging society because we're having fewer children and people are living longer. And then family, which was mom, dad, and 2.5 kids, is now going to be a plurality of types, and there's an actual middle child extinction going on because now we're having fewer than 2 kids. Gender identity, that was, it's in the news right now because someone's trying to change it, but it was fixed and binary when I was born. It's now much more gender fluid for a lot of people. Consent. So it was sort of silently permissible to sexually harass someone. Now we've got Me Too and Time's Up. Occupation, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but it used to be a fixed employee identity. The first thing you say to someone is what you do or what company you work for. I think we're moving towards a portfolio of self-expression, but we're not giving the people the tools to talk about it. And then leadership, I stand in front of you today not because of any company I worked at, not because of any degree I have or any position I held, but I've been giving these talks now for a couple of years. It's gotten a lot of attention with people, and so I'm in front of you as some sort of expert, but I'm not credentialed as an expert in the way that we formally used to credential people. And then finally, we've had a society that was largely white, male-dominated in terms of the leadership position. We're seeing, and I think we'll see more of more diverse leaders and more female leaders. Certainly, I hope so. So these are some pretty big shifts within a single generation.